Thank you again so much for joining us for this panel orientation. And thank you for agreeing to be a reader for these organizational grants. We are really excited. This is a pilot program, and we will be administering a second round of funding. So we're very excited. The application was due on July 13th. So as you can tell, the process is underway. Organizations could request up to $10,000. So we did our introductions. I want to welcome you again and thank you again. Our mission at the Arts Foundation is to advance the artistic expression, the civic participation, and equitable economic growth for our diverse communities by supporting, promoting, and advocating for arts and culture in our So today's goal, we did welcome and introductions. We are going to review a little bit about the 2023 ARPA Organization Grant Program. We will review the criteria that we are asking you to utilize to assess the application materials. We're going to talk a little bit about equity. We will review conflict of interest. And we will end our day by talking a little bit about how to balance our implicit bias and criteria that we're utilizing to evaluate all these materials. So the rescue plan funds, which fund this grant program, are intended to help support jobs in the arts sector, to keep the doors open to arts organizations nationwide, and to assist the field in its response to and recovery from the COVID-19 pandemic. So in the narrative questions that we ask the applicants, there's going to be a question about the COVID, their impact, the impact of COVID-19 upon their organization. We will not ask you to evaluate that question. That is an internal question for us, the staff, to take into account and then to report to our own funders. The intention of this program is to invest in Southern Arizona's arts economy to, number one, restore or create jobs, and to incentivize arts and civic engagement. So we anticipate that we are able to fund between 25 and 40 grants in amounts of between 5,000 or 10,000. And these folks were encouraged to support primarily funding to hire artists at any stage of their career, to deliver quality arts programming and services that are meeting the needs of their organization and their communities as they self-describe them. And no match was required of this funding. So I left the funding period here because it's kind of an important part of this grant program. A lot of grants in the field request that artists or organizations plan out a project that will happen in the future, or a festival or activities or convening that will happen in the future. The funding period for this grant started in August 15th of 2022. And the funding will be disbursed by December 15, 2023. So the funding in a lot of cases will be retroactive. And so what I want to assure you is that internally we have reviewed the scope of activities, the timeline that those will happen in. Everyone you will read is eligible. So you don't have to necessarily pay attention about, will this happen in time? We have vetted all of that. And also, folks were actually encouraged to go back and look at, how many, did you pay $10,000 to several artists? And can we reimburse you for that expense? Because this is a recovery grant. Okay, so the priority eligible expenses were artist contracts, So expenses related to artists or contractual personnel that were supporting services provided for activities within these organizations. And then the secondary eligible expenses were salary support, which it pains me to say that a lot of the organizations that we spoke to, primarily the smaller ones, which there are quite a few of, actually run on through volunteers. So we encourage them to, again, look to artist contracts and potentially pay their staff. So you might see some organizations that are requesting funding, future funding, and a lot of those are going to be to pay staff. Again, the eligible expenses that these organizations requested have all been vetted. So you don't have to do that work. Everyone who you will read has been eligible within these parameters. We're also going to be supporting facilities costs, such as rent and utilities, and then costs associated with project-related health and safety supplies during the pandemic, and marketing and promotion costs. But the bulk of the funding, we're happy to report, is being requested by these organizations who applied to support artist contracts, which is really great. So who will be in the pool? We have 66 applicants who are eligible. 53 are Tucson-based. 13 are located throughout Southern Arizona. The total funding request is $645,000, and we have around $500,000 available. So the bulk of these organizations will receive support. And what we like to do with our applicants who are not funded is we develop a kind of funding relationship with them. So anyone who's not funded in this round, we will be sure to prioritize in our communication when we launch this next organizational ARPA grant. We will reach out to them and encourage them either to apply or make the application very similar as much as we can within our own requirements to make sure that these applicants are then able to reapply, so that hopefully at the second application, they'll be successful in funding. We don't want you to think that we're really in the business of cultivating capacity and cultivating relationships, and they won't be entirely left out in the cold. We're going to try and make sure and make this kind of gateway application for them for this specific funding. So what do these organizations do in their communities? The bulk of them are engaging in activities that are related to music. There's folks that are doing film, theater and performance, visual arts, writing and literature, dance, media arts, traditional arts, and community arts. The reason why we want to go through this list with you is so that you know that we know that you will be reading a really diverse slate of activities. And we encourage you not to compare applicants to other applicants. This is why. Because folks are, not only are they located, throughout the southern region of Arizona, but they're also going to be doing really different things. So this is what we want you to look at when you are evaluating not even the organizations, but really the materials that they submitted, right? These narratives don't fully encapsulate everything that these organizations are doing within their own communities. The narrative questions that we published in our guidelines, the information that these applicants had available was actually this. We try to be really transparent about what we're asking them to provide and how it will be evaluated. And we try to make sure that both applicants and panelists have the same information. So the first question we ask them to answer is, tell us how you plan to use the funds and how this will have an immediate equitable impact on the local arts workforce during the funding period. The way we want you to think about their answer is, what is the potential to have immediate impact on the arts workforce that they are describing? The second question we ask them to kind of tell you about is about their programs and what is the potential to serve, to reach, to hire, and or support individuals whose opportunities to experience the arts are limited by ethnicity, by economics, by geography, or disability. And what we want you to kind of ponder about as you read from these organizations is like, what is the potential to serve, to reach, to hire, and or support individuals whose opportunities to experience the arts limited by these factors? Like, what is that potential? The third question that you will read in their narrative is, tell us about your ability to carry out the financial and equitable responsibilities of this award by the alignment of the budget and other resources with the goals and requirements of this funding opportunity. So what we want you to assess is, did they actually address their capacity to carry out their award? They were each asked to provide eligible expenses. And before anyone receives an award, the staff will internally vet all of those. They're going to have to submit receipts, essentially, for this specific grant program. So we're going to do that vetting. What we want you to assess is primarily if there's a component of future work, is like, what is the feasibility that they'll be able to carry that out? For the folks who are referencing work that already happened, this is a super easy question for you because it means it already happened. So it was indeed 100% feasible. So that's why we're sort of want you to think about, this is where the timeline would come into play, because then you could just go check. Okay. There are 3 more questions, but you only have to think about 2 more. So we also asked them to tell us about their arts and culture mission and the core work of their organization. And so we really want you to think about, like, what is the significance of that mission and that core work? This is where we want you to start thinking about, like, what are those communities? And we really want to diversify our investment and include really everyone who might reside in Tucson and in Southern Arizona. And then the 5th question is, tell us how your organization has normalized or affirmatively advanced equity, civil rights, racial justice, and equal opportunity in its organizational culture and public programming. And what we want you to think about is really, like, is there evidence of this, of the organization affirmatively advancing equity, civil rights, racial justice, and or equal opportunity as part of their organizational culture? A lot of this work will have happened at the tail end of a really difficult time for arts and culture organizations. The pandemic, particularly, for example, for, as you saw the slate of panelists, some of them were performing, right? They were doing music, they were doing dance, they were doing theater. And so we really want them to tell us, community arts, if you were doing, work in community settings, like we really want them to kind of tell us what was their response. And we hope that you will make an assessment. The 6th question is really internal for us, for our own reporting purposes, because these are rescue funds. We need to account to our own funders. We will have to provide a not so brief summary, although theirs should be brief, of how the COVID-19 pandemic impacted the organization's operations. So here's where they can tell us a little bit about it. It also might be an opportunity if there were issues, in answering question 4, question 5, about the fact that maybe they weren't able to like advance equal opportunity because the COVID-19 pandemic drastically reduced the operational budget, or everyone had, they could not do work in community. This is where you might find some of that, but that is the only way in which you would have to assess that answer in any way. And then we are asking you to provide one number that will encapsulate your assessment of all of these questions. So 1, the application is really not competitive. I would say, a lot of folks ask, well, how should I score? So 1 is not competitive, 9 is excellent, right? As long as you stay individually within your own scope, right? So everyone who is really not competitive receives a 1. And then everyone who is really, really great receives a 7. As long as you maintain your own standard, it'll be fine, because we aggregate, the panel scores are aggregated, right? So as long as you stay within your own, within that own numbering system, you'll be fine. Now, if you start, so we ask that you do not try to score everyone at once, because you'll be crankier towards the end, right? And so that's when the scoring might get off whack a little bit. Take your, don't score while you're hangry, right? Make sure you've eaten. If you caffeinate a little bit, make sure your caffeine levels are good. Split your scoring. We received 66 applications, and we are hoping you might agree to review 33 applications. And it takes roughly, once you get the feel for the content of the application, I would say it honestly takes, and because the application information we asked was so compact, the more information we request of organizations or applicants in general, the more work they have to do at the beginning. Pro bono, right? They don't get remunerated for that unless they get a grant. And really the grant is for other work. And so we try to only request information that will be evaluated by all of you. The applications are quite compact, so it should take you, depending on how fast of a reader you are, we anticipate 15 to 18 minutes per application. Some of them are really clear, and that's like a 10-minute read between the narrative and quickly perusing their budgets. Again, because everybody who will go to you for review has already been vetted for all the technical issues, all of those, everyone is eligible. So a few review tips. Because we ask you to provide a comment for each application, so that for the folks who don't receive funding, we can then give them specific constructive feedback so that they can improve their narrative. Or if there was something that they just did not answer or that was really confusing, so that they know, and then they can incorporate that into their practice as they request future funding. So please provide specifics, make evaluative statements. So, the narrative details around the budget were confusing, and the arithmetic did not add up. That's it. So make them, like, if you were writing this application, what would you want to know about how to improve it? Again, try to not, it's almost impossible we'll talk about that a little bit when we talk about bias, but try to not compare applications because again, some organizations have really large budgets. Others have smaller budgets and are run by one person. Others have large staff. Some are going to be doing visual art. Some are going to be doing community arts. Some are doing traditional arts. There might be a museum in the mix. So it's really hard. They're all fruit, but some are grapes and some are pineapples. So it's kind of hard to compare, right? They're all good in fruit salad. We need them. They're part of a healthy ecosystem, but they might be doing very different work that's really vitally important, but really different. And then assess ability. Adhere to the evaluation criteria. If you find yourself thinking about need, come back to that criteria. The criteria is really meant to let me rephrase that. When I score applications, as I like to do, I submit applications as an artist so that I remember what it feels like to get rejected and so that I remember the joy also and the hardship, right? It takes a lot of time. It's a good practice. And I also participate in panels so that I remember how much work we're asking you to do. And when I sit on a panel, I feel like the evaluation criteria protects me from having to think outside of that box, because that box is the thing that applicants were told we were going to stay within. So if you adhere to the criteria, this is a gift to applicants because you're honoring the thing we told them we were going to do, which is to only look at that. So think of it in that way. Funding is limited, so be judicious. Don't be afraid to score. But again, just remain within your, if you do from one, I hardly ever use one in my own scoring. It feels really mean, even though it's not, it's just a number. But so I have my range, but I just stick to that range. Okay, so equity. The Arts Foundation for Tucson and Southern Arizona has an equity strategy that aims to identify and eliminate barriers that have prevented undercapitalized groups full participation from the agency's programs and to strengthen equity, diversity, and inclusion in the arts and culture sector for all communities of Southern Arizona. The program is committed to a just and equitable contribution of funding. To that commitment, the Arts Foundation for Tucson and Southern Arizona will consider equity and geographic parity as part of our final decision-making and will work to expand the reach of this relief opportunity to a broad, diverse community of artists. You'll notice that this is our job. So there are questions we included in the narrative that ask some equity and diversity questions, right? And we encourage you to consider those. When it comes to your final recommendations on the day of the panel, please know that it is not entirely on your shoulders. We, alongside our really amazing board, we will make sure that that final slate is as diverse, given the applicant pool, as it possibly can be. We're in this with you. Okay, so conflict of interest. You will receive a list of applicants that will be assigned to your panel. The panels are being decided based on who can meet on which panel day. That is how you will receive your applications. And once you peruse your list, you will receive a letter of agreement, and there will be a conflict of interest form there. You may not serve as a panelist if there is if you are an applicant to this program, which I thought I vetted all of you, but if I made a mistake, please let me know. And you may serve on the panel, but not review a specific application if you receive direct financial benefit from the applicant or proposal being reviewed, if you serve with or without payment as a consultant, as a board member or contractor to a specific applicant being reviewed, or if your cousin runs that organization, you may not score that application. You may simply recuse yourself from scoring that, and then we will aggregate we will make sure that there is a score present by our chair, who's one of our board members. We'll make sure that the scoring doesn't negatively impact that organization. So if you see someone and you're like, I think I have a conflict of interest, or if you feel that you cannot be impartial, please reach out to me. It's not a big deal. Just send me an email and we'll sort it out. So let's watch this short video really quickly about unconscious bias. Let me make sure you can hear it. Can you hear her? No? Okay. Let me.
We can send the link if you prefer, since we're coming up on time.
Yeah. Yeah, I think we might have to. Okay, so in a nutshell, and this is, we will send you this presentation. We will send you the guidelines that the applicants reviewed when they applied, in case you need to peruse them. When we will send you a panelist manual with additional details. And of course, if anything comes up, I'm always available to support you in your role as a panelist. This is coming up to kind of the end of this funding journey for folks who began their applications. I'm here to support you in any way. We're deeply grateful. We're deeply grateful for your time and your generosity and your discernment. Basically, please adhere to the evaluation criteria. The video we were going to watch talks about implicit bias and how we all have them. Impartiality is impossible, but as long as we are aware of our own biases, then we can be aware that maybe we're being a little bit harsher or a little bit nicer to an applicant based on our own particular lived experiences. It's not about eliminating those biases, because that's impossible, but it's really about just being aware and asking ourselves, am I making a just assessment based on the review criteria and the application materials that were submitted by this organization? And if you have any questions, again, I'm happy to support you as a panelist. We can't thank you enough, but we can remunerate some of your time, which we are delighted to do. So thank you for agreeing to evaluate 33 applications. We are able to remunerate you, to increase your remuneration. So we will remunerate you in the amount of $500. You'll also receive a letter of agreement, which states those details. If you wish to donate your honoraria, you may do so. You certainly don't have to. Again, we thank you so much. Does anyone have any questions in the last 2 minutes we have together?
I actually have a quick question. I think if I understood correctly, there's a total of 66 applications, right? And then we only review 33? Or, okay,
Yeah, we're gonna have two panels. We're gonna have two panels. We just fear that having all of you review 66 applications in such a compact time would actually undermine our request that you not review while hangry or tired. We're really trying to set up a process that is conducive to you pacing yourself and having enough time to assess the applications that were still, regardless of the skill of the person putting together the materials, all of the applications were thoughtfully put together to the best of the applicant's abilities. So we just want to make sure that we honor that and that we don't make it really hard on you so that you come back and work with us on future panels.
okay.
So
Thank
we'll
you for clarifying that.
and what we will do is we will fund the top percentage of both panels. So we won't like mix everyone's scores together because you're all going to be scoring differently. So you will each score your applications. There will be two panels. Each panel will have a meeting. You will then have a moment to review all the final kind of lineup once scores are aggregated. You'll have a moment to discuss applications. And then at the end of that panel meeting, you'll have a final kind of lineup and a sort of funding recommendation for our board to review and for staff to like review and present to the board. And the top of those organizations will receive funding. And the folks who don't, we will make sure that, again, we reach out to them and we encourage them to apply to the next round of funding, which is coming up in a few months. Yeah. Any other questions? That's a great question. Any other questions? Thank you so much. Thank you for the extra minute. If anything comes up, please don't hesitate to reach out. You'll be hearing from me with the host of PDFs, and we can't thank you enough. Muchas gracias.